Hello YouTube, it's Mr. Max here, and last time I began my journey to try to determine what I believe is the single best Pokemon rival team across the entire franchise. Last time I just did the rivals from generations 1 through 6, and today I'm going to be finishing the last three generations, 7 through 9. And despite it only being three generations today, as opposed to the six from last video, the number of rival teams I was able to find and analyze almost doubled the total amount that I did last video. So without further ado, let's just jump right into this presentation I made to try to determine who I believe to have the single best rival team across the entire franchise. Okay, let's jump right into my presentation to determine who I believe is the single best rival team across the entire franchise. This presentation finishing out the rival teams from Generation 7 through 9. I'll have a link to the previous video up, and the cards are in the description, so you can see how I got to this point. I'll have an overview for the rankings in just a minute. But first, let's just go over the criteria I'll be analyzing them on. Just like last time, I'll be starting off by analyzing the overall team strength. So, just how challenging they are, how many overall Pokemon they have. The base stat total will be at least a part of that. Just how much of a roadblock, how impactful of a trainer they are throughout your journey. Originality slash personality. If their team seems unique to them, if their team has a lot of overlaps with other major trainers, and if those overlaps do happen, do those picks at least feel like they fit them with their personality, or just how they are, that kind of thing. This one is definitely more vibes based, but I feel like it's very important when thinking about a rival character. It's very important to try to associate them with certain Pokemon, and if those Pokemon are used by other trainers, I personally feel like that's not ideal. Next, how will they represent the region? This is a rival character that you'll be interacting with several times throughout the region. So ideally, they should have a good amount of Pokemon that are native to the region that they're a rival of. And some rivals have barely any, so that's not ideal. And lastly, I will only be talking about the final team of six Pokemon, or whatever number is highest when I'm judging and ranking these. Because some rivals that show up in this video will have a team of six, and then the final time you're able to fight them, they'll actually have a smaller team for some reason. Just the way the mechanics works, it's the way like during tournaments or ways you would fight them. They for some reason have a lower number of team members, but I'll only be talking about the final team or the fullest team they could possibly have. However, earlier teams throughout the playthrough will be considered if a tie is needed to be broken, or if context is needed for why I put them where I did. Because yes, I will be judging their team as a whole, but if their Pokemon didn't develop the way I thought it would, if they just kind of threw certain Pokemon on last minute, it seems like it didn't really come together based on how they progress throughout the game, those things will at least be considered when looking at the full team. Okay, so current rankings. Again, I'll have a link to the previous video, but just a brief overview here. We went through 17 different rival teams last video, and just briefly from the bottom up. Number 17, Trevor, only having three Pokemon. Only one of those three is from this region. They didn't really seem to like work together. Same with Shauna. There wasn't really a unifying theme with them, but still only having three Pokemon. May for Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. Whichever game it is, Ruby, Sapphire, or Emerald, she's still, the final time you fight her, only has four Pokemon and not a fully evolved starter. It's still just a Combuskin, for example. So that's terrible. Tierno, I at least like the potential of him having a dance themed team, but him only having three Pokemon, them not having full move sets, and just I feel like there are other opportunities, throughout with Pokemon you could have had in the region to have, to have a full team of six dance themed Pokemon. That's why he's slightly higher than May, but that's only having three Pokemon. You can't get much higher than that. Wally at number 13 from Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. He only has five Pokemon. You only fight him the two times, and his team seems kind of thrown together. He has two aces or two Pokemon that are aces of other gym leaders that don't really seem to fit him all that well. And it's just not a very impressive team. Silver at number 12. A third of his team is the same as Blue's team from Yellow. Half of his team are three Pokemon that are some of the most overused Pokemon throughout all of Gen 1 and 2. His Crobat is a Golbat for most of the game, and you fight a lot of Golbats. His team just felt very tedious by the end of it. It felt like it didn't really have any personality or uniqueness to him. So that's why, even though it is a full team of six, it's still only at number 12 as of right now. May from Mega Ruby Alpha Sapphire. It's an improvement. It's at least five Pokemon. She at least has a fully evolved starter. But considering this was your opportunity to fix the issues of her team from Ruby Sapphire and Emerald, and you didn't really fix all the issues I have, I feel like she can't get much higher than the number 11 right now. Serena, very forgettable rival. Her team, she only has two Pokemon that are from Kalos. There's just the Pokemon she has doesn't really seem to fit her. They don't really seem to have any cohesive connective tissue. It just doesn't really, I don't know. It doesn't really seem to really. It's also really not that strong of a rival team. You fight her so many times throughout. So, however, as you'll see throughout this video, there are going to be several rival teams that have five Pokemon or less, and Serena is the absolute floor for anybody that has six Pokemon. If you have five or less, you have to go below Serena. That's just kind of how I decided to do it, because honestly, I may even prefer May's team overall to Serena's, but because May only has five, she has to be below Serena, and that's for every rival that has five Pokemon. Just for context for future rankings. Hugh, I like his final team enough. However, half of it is nearly identical to Charon's, and I don't really like that. You fight him about as much as you did fight Charon, yet therefore he seems to have just not a lot of personality with his team itself because it had a lot of overlap with a previous rival. Sharon and Bianca are very close together. I like their teams fine enough. I don't love how they randomly have overlap with other gym leaders and Elite Four members. And Sharon's team especially, you fight a lot of Pokemon in the Unifizzet line, a lot in the Purloin line throughout the game. So his team also felt a little tedious by the end of it. Barry's team is very, very solid. I don't love how there's four different Pokemon that are on major trainers teams. I do really like the Snorlax and the Heracross being Honey Tree Pokemon, but because of him having four that are overlaps, I can't bring him higher than six. Blue from Red and Blue, very good, very iconic, but similar to Barry, he has a lot of overlap with other major trainers, Gyarados, Arcanine, even Alakazam, like these Pokemon that, if not their ace, are heavily associated with other trainers. So as a team, it is very good, but as far as uniqueness to him, not as much. Blue from Yellow is a lot better because I believe the only overlaps are Cloyster, Alakazam, and Ninetales, so it's at least one fewer that are overlaps. And none of those outside of Alakazam are aces, so it's at least a little better compared to Blue, but they are Blue from Red and Blue, but I do think they are still very close. Wally from Mega Ruby Alpha Sapphire just has an amazing team. It just really shows how dedicated this guy is to becoming strong by the end of the game. And I really like that for him. And I like that team a lot. Blue from Leaf Green Fire Red, fantastic team. I love the Tyranitar. The Heracross was a good pick. Just, there's a lot of good picks and just, as a unit, just a very, very good team. Plus, going to give a little bit of leeway to trainers that are specifically fought in the post game or champions like those. I'm going to give a little bit of leeway, especially post game champion fights. If those come up from the in this video, like, yeah, his Alakazam is like maybe slightly annoying, but yeah, it's been so long since you fought Sabrina that it doesn't matter as much. And then in from Black and White, nearly perfect team. The only thing I even had like an issue with is his Vanillux felt a little out of place, but it's a very strong Pokemon, so I can't blame him for having one. Okay, so let's continue on with the new entries here, starting with the rivals from Sun and Moon. Starting with How. This is a solid team. It is a little annoying that he only has 5 Pokemon. It's a little annoying that they have another rival that has an evolution because Serena also has an evolution. I don't necessarily love that, but I don't know, it's kind of fun throughout the game seeing him evolve, like literally evolve his Pikachu and his Eevee along with his other starter, essentially having like a dual starter with his Alolan Raichu. I kind of like that. And then Komala feels like a nice touch for him. It's nowhere else in the game. Um, it's the kind of Pokemon that I would give to a rival if I were, like, if he didn't have Komala and it was nowhere else. It's the kind of Pokemon that I would throw on a rival team, kind of like how we did Durant on Sharon's team, how he fixed that. Um, so I like that here. I like Herbominable. Uh, his grandpa is the Kahuna from the first island who uses fighting type Pokemon. So yeah, I like that he has Herbominable. I just wish he had a sixth Pokemon. If he had 6 Pokemon, he would be honestly pretty high on the list. And the way I would fix it is just give him his Noivern from Ultra Sun and Moon. Even if it is just tacked on at the end, like, he has that 5, then in a post game fight or something, he gets Noivern. I think that would be fine. It's not a Pokemon I need to see progress throughout the game, especially since it's only a 2-stager and it evolves at like 47 or something ridiculously high number. So it's a Noibat for most of the game. So, giving him Noivern is perfectly fine. If this were his team, he would actually be pretty high in the list. But unfortunately, because you only have 5 Pokemon, and as discussed, if you have 5 Pokemon, the highest you can get is right below Serena. That's where I'm putting him, right below Serena, right above May, because, like I've said, I'm very annoyed at May for not really fixing all of the issues I have with her from Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald. Moving on to Gladion. In theory, I really like this team. I like that he has 3 Pokemon that are friendship evolutions, similar to Silver, but extrapolated to an even bigger degree. It's not just Crobat; it's also Lucario and Silvally. I like Porygon Z since he's associated with the Ether Foundation, and that's just a Pokemon that feels like they would have. I even think they give you a Porygon in one of the it's either Sun and Moon and or Ultra Sun and Moon, so that's cool. Weavile, I think it fits him fine enough. However, I don't love that because Weavile is here. Weavile and Crobat are both on Cyrus's team. I know that was 3 generations prior to this, but it still feels like, he's kind of a villain type character, or at least like like the mean rival type character. And it not necessarily lazy, but I feel like there are other choices you could give him for a dark type that would fit him just as good, if not even better, that wouldn't have a good portion of his team overlap with another major trainer, even if they're not from this game. So I tried to give him his Zoroark from Ultra Sun and Moon. I like Zoroark and Lucario being on the same team because, like, Zoroark was kind of pitched as the new Lucario in Black and White. It didn't really pan out the way I'm sure they hoped it would. Lucario is still way more popular than Zoroark ever will be, but it's still kind of cool seeing them together like this. And Umbreon is kind of what I was alluding to with is that a Weavile have him have a dark type that fits his team better, and I feel just fits him better. Um, Not only is it another friendship evolution, now he has four friendship evolutions. It also kind of mirrors Hal's evolutions as well, because he he has Flareon, Vaporeon. He has Leafeon actually instead of Jolteon, but regardless, he has a evolution, and Gladion also has an evolution. So I like that duality there. But again, because he only has five Pokemon, because I don't love that a good portion of his team was used by another major trainer in the past, and I feel there are other Pokemon that just could fit him better, putting him down at number 12, right behind Hal. But they both have significant chance for redemption here. Not that their teams are bad, they just have a lot of potential that I know they can reach if they have a sixth Pokemon. And boy, their Ultra Sun and Moon teams, both of them, they brought it. Here's Hal's team from Ultra Sun and Moon. I really like this team. Um, Tauros is one of those Pokemon that it's been around since Generation One, but it's gotten almost no love throughout the entire franchise. Like I legitimately can't think of a single other major team that had a Tauros. Maybe like rematches with maybe Norman had one in the Emerald rematches. Maybe I know we had a bunch of strong normal types, but maybe not even. I know there had to be at least one or two in the Pokestar, the Pokemon World Tournament in Black and White 2. On for how many normal gym leaders there are, there had to be at least one somewhere. But if I have to go to the Pokemon World Tournament just to try to find a Tauros, I don't know. I feel like it's just something that even though it's not from this region, I'm definitely going to give it a pass because A, I like Tauros a lot, and B, it's a Generation 1 Pokemon that hasn't had any love, this entire time, and I like it here a lot. And Noivern, like I already said, it's just a very strong Pokemon that definitely feels like a Pokemon that a champion would have, and how is the champion in Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, even though it does kind of come out of nowhere. But it is still fun him seeing Noibat throughout the game as a Pokemon that Noibat specifically you don't really see a lot on trainer teams. Again, it is kind of funny seeing it just be a Noibat for a majority of the game because it doesn't evolve until its 40s. But it's still a good Pokemon to have on the Elite Four. And then Crabominable, again, I like that parallel with his grandpa being the fighting Kahuta. So even though I like this team a lot, my fixed team isn't really going to be a fixed team. It's more going to be just like an alternate. Here's what they could have done. This team is very, very solid, and this is just another suggestion. There's going to be a couple of those throughout this video where I like the team a lot. These are something they could have done that would have been, maybe not better, but I think equally as cool. I think I think it would be very fun if his team was more or less created specifically to take down his grandpa. Obviously he has Alolan Raichu. I personally feel like his canon ace is Primarina, mostly because yours. I always associate the player character in the Sun and Moon games with Decidueye, so he would have Primarina. Um, so Psyche type, a Fairy type. Rangaroo isn't really used anywhere else in the entire game, to my knowledge, at least not on major trainers. So give him a Rangaroo. Same with Granbull. It's now a fairy type, and he doesn't have outside of the maybe having Primarina. Um, it's a fairy type that he can use to counter his grandpa's fighting types, and also it has a similar vibe to Tauros. I feel. Plus, I'm pretty sure you can find Snubble a lot earlier. A lot earlier in the game than Tauros, so you can it's something you potentially see develop throughout the game. But something that I think would be even more fun to see develop is Salamence. Um, Bagon is a Pokemon they added. I believe they added to the Ultra Sun and Pokedex, or at least they added it as an early encounter on the first island. And I wouldn't let them do this, but you can even get like a level 10 Salamence as an SOS encounter when you fight Bagon in Ultra Sun and Moon. I wouldn't let him just catch a Salamence, right up, but straight up. But the fact that you the player could go throughout the entire game with Salamence, I think is very fun. So seeing him at least have a Bagon that develops throughout, similar to his Noibat, but it can actually evolve. I think that's a lot of fun. So I like this team a lot. Again, it's not. I don't think it is necessarily something that they should have done, but it's definitely what I feel could be, another fun suggestion for them to do. And how, honestly, his Ultra Sun and Moon team, like it surprised me, and I like it so much that I'm putting it at number two. Outside of the Crabominable being the same ace as his grandpa, which I think that thematically is fine. There are no other major Pokemon that are overlaps. It's just I think it uses a lot of Pokemon that are otherwise fairly overlooked, and I just like it quite a bit. Ideally, it would have one other Generation 7 Pokemon in it, but uh, outside of the Oranguru, like I mentioned, there aren't that many other Gen 7 Pokemon that aren't accounted for throughout the various major trainers that you could fight in, the title defense or just other random fights. So I'm going to give that one more or less of a pass. So yeah, Hal is currently sitting at number two overall. Gladion, very similar story, only had five Pokemon and, could use a chance for redemption. And I think this is it. They switched out Weavile for Zoroark. Ideally, he wouldn't have essentially ends ace from Black and White, but I do feel like it fits him well. Plus, there's fun shenanigans, that happen when you fight him where he throws out a Zubat, so you try to use a psychic move on it, but it doesn't work because it's actually a Zoroark. So I think that's very fun. And then they randomly at the very, in the final fight you have with them in the post game, they tack on a Kanto starter Pokemon because why not? And his Silvally changes its typing accordingly. So at least his Silvally, I think, has a type that's good against yours, and then the starter is one that you're good against. So I like that a lot. So again, this is another situation where I'm not going to say my suggestion is better per se, but it's just just another possible suggestion that they could do. Instead of Zoroark, you do Umbreon, like I mentioned before. So you have at least four Pokemon that are friendship evolutions, and then just instead of the Kanto star Pokemon, you do the Johto Pokemon. They don't get nearly as much love as the Kanto Pokemon, so I think Typhlosion or Feraligatr or whatever for Typhlosion, I feel like fits it aesthetically, I guess, the best. But yeah, again, not necessarily an improvement, but it's just another suggestion that I think could be cool if they did it. So because Gladion did, get six Pokemon, did switch out Weavile for another Dark type that I think fits him better. We're finally at the point where I gotta split it to two columns. I put Gladion at number 5, right behind Wally and right above Blue from Yellow. His team just impressed me quite a bit. It doesn't have quite the oomph factor that Wally from Oros has, but I like it overall just a little bit better than Blue from Yellow. Speaking of Yellow, let's go Pikachu and Eevee. Trace, his team is kind of an enigma to me because his character, just as a unit, his character is kind of nothing. He lives in this weird limbo space where, like, he's clearly supposed to be Gary or Blue or whatever you want to call him, but they specifically made him a friendly rival. Like he's he shows up in all the same places that Gary does, but his personality is so different and his team is ever so slightly different, yet some things are similar. It's a weird, he's weird. So I'm not judging him when I'm judging the team. I'm purely judging the team. And I really like this team. Obviously, Pidgeot, however you say it, Mega Pidgeot is great. It did get a little nerfed because of just the way Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee work. It no longer has access to its ability No Guard, so it can't fire off hurricanes with 100% accuracy, and that's kind of the main thing you've used Pidgeot for, is just firing off hurricanes and heat waves and whatever else they can have. Uh, and its attacking stat, like its special attack went up a lot, but its attack didn't at all go up when it mega evolves. So this Pidgeot can't really do what Mega Pidgeot normally does, but it still looks really cool. I think Mega Pidgeot fits him very well. So there's that. I really like the lore behind his Marowak. He finds the Cubone. That is the baby of the Ghost Marowak, and that baby and him bond well. I like that a lot. The only thing I don't love is his Vileplume, that being Erica's ace. In my memory, I thought it was a Victory Bell, which is the only change I'd really make is to give him a Victory Bell instead of Vileplume. In my memory, I thought it was Victory Bell, but Vileplume, it completes the Fire Grass Water Core, and it's fine. Like I said, ideally it would be Victory Bell or even Executor, since that I also don't think was used anywhere else significantly. Um, but it's not nearly as bad as how Gary was in Red and Blue, where he had Alakazam before you could ever fight Sabrina. Like, and I feel him getting Vileplume after you've already fought Erica, that makes Erica feel he's a little more important than Blue does with Sabrina, where by the time you get to Sabrina, her Alakazam is no longer feels like hers because you already fought one of these. But yeah, the only change I would do is switch out Vileplume for Victory Bell. You still have the Fire Grass Water Core. Like maybe you switch out Slowbro for Poliwrath or something, but Bruno already has Poliwrath, was not as big of a deal, and there aren't that many fire types to pick from. So, I think it's just a very solid Gen 1 team. And because of that, I'm actually going to put it above Blue from Yellow, at least right now. That one specifically, I could kind of go either way on. Um, I there's merits to both definitely, but I think the Mega Pidgeot just makes Trace in my eyes just a little bit better than Blue, despite the nerfs I did mention for Mega Pidgeot. It is still a very strong Mega. So yeah, on any given day that could switch, but it still is not. They're neither in the top 5, so I don't really, see. I don't really. It's not as big of a deal to get that exactly right, but as of right now, Trace being above Blue from Yellow feels right to me. Now on to Sword and Shield. Hop's journey throughout this game is incredibly interesting to me because he's essentially a significantly better version of Serena, where her story throughout the X and Y game is she keeps battling you and you keep winning because she's a bad trainer. Like the Pokemon she uses just aren't that diverse or not that strong. Um, and she only ever really uses 4 Pokemon until the very end. And then every time you beat her, she just keeps getting sadder and sadder for no reason. She keeps just saying stuff that makes the player feel bad for beating her, yet you have to. So it doesn't feel good to have to fight her over and over again. Whereas a Hop, his motivations for why he wants to get stronger are incredibly clear. You know, he wants to be his brother Leon eventually. He wants to become the champion. And something really cool they do with him is after it's like the third or fourth fight with him, he has his main squad of Wooloo, of Corvus Squire, of I think he has like a pretty sure he has a Sandaconda or a not Sandaconda, but the first stage of Sandaconda and a Toxel at one point. But then the next time you fight him, he has almost a completely different team. That's when he starts using a Snorlax. He has Trevenant, Heatmore, um, and then the starter. So, so he's kind of it's like, oh, in order for me to get stronger, in order for me to beat, in order to beat the player, I need to switch my team up and see if this team can beat him. But then after you beat that team, and once he realizes that like winning isn't everything, he realizes that maybe his life wants to go in a different direction. His team kind of consolidates into ones that are clearly more his favorite. I really like the team where he has a Cramorant. This is his final team, but the battle right before this, he has Cramorant instead of Zamazenta. I really like that team a lot. Just Cramorant just feels like just the culmination of that idea where it's definitely not the strongest Pokemon. It's a very weird Pokemon, but I like it, so I'm going to use it. Whether or not it'll help me win, it is my one of my favorite Pokemon. I want to use it, and I think that's just a good lesson to teach the player. However, his final team, as much as I like it for him, compared to all the other rivals, it just doesn't quite pack that punch I like rivals to have. If Pincurchin were a different electric type, like a Toxtricity or a Bolthound, this would be a different story. I think he would rank higher than I did put him. But Pincurchin just doesn't. I don't know. It seems a little random here. I'm also getting a little tired of Snorlax because Barry has a Snorlax. Kukui, his champion team from Sun and Moon, has a Snorlax, and he has a Snorlax. And then Legends Arceus, which obviously came out after this, but like the guy that looks like Professor Rowan, he also has a Snorlax. I just feel like Snorlax is one of those Pokemon that it's cool. It is one of my favorite Gen 1 Pokemon. It's just one of those things they just kind of throw on a team if they don't really know what else to put there. So yeah, that's kind of what that is. I like this team fine, but I don't know. I think it would have been kind of cool he had kept if he had cycled in more Pokemon he used previously. Like I said, his electric type, his Pincurchin, he just kind of throws on toward the end, even though he had a Toxel. In my game, that would be a Yamper. So he has Sandaconda and Boltund. And not like it's not a crazy change, but I like the idea of him completely cycling out his team outside of his starter and then bringing back Corviknight, bringing back Dubwool, and then also those other two you haven't seen in forever. I like that idea. And it's not necessarily like it's not that this team is bad. I just feel like this team is more representative of what they're going for with him as a character. Current rankings, I have a Hop slightly below Barry, but slightly above Bianca. Again, if Bianca didn't have Chandelure and Mienshao on her final team in Black and White, I think she would be higher. But because those two were randomly thrown on at the end when there are other Pokemon that weren't represented at all that could have been, that's why she's that low. And Hop is right below the other rival that has a Snorlax. Marnie, another situation where I like the team fine, but because it only has 5 Pokemon, it can only go so high. However, I don't love how her team has one Pokemon that overlaps with Piers's team. They both have a Scrafty. Like there are other dark types you could have picked from. You could have thrown another poison type on here. Uh, because clearly toxicity isn't a dark type, but it still kind of fits her vibe. I just kind of feel like the only two, the two major dark type major trainers who are brother and sister, ideally they shouldn't have any overlap unless it's like I don't know, unless it's specifically stated why they would have these two that overlap. I would rather them not have anything that's the same. So I switched out Liepard for Thievel. I switched out Scrafty for Mandibuzz, and I gave her a Drapion. Uh, Piers has a Skuntank, so I wanted to give her the other Poison Dark type that's from Sinnoh, so Drapion. And Thievel, it's very weird that she used Liepard originally because Thievel does exist. I know a lot of Team Yell trainers have Thievel, but it's a dark type from this gen, and ideally, a dark specialist should have as many dark types from this gen as possible. So, yeah, I feel like that just makes sense for her. But like I said, because she only has five Pokemon, she can only really go so high because she has overlap with her brother. Um, I have to put her out down at 17. Yeah, right below Gladion, right above May. Next up, Bead. Mayday. No, I'm gonna say Bead. I've never heard it said out loud before. I'm gonna say Bead. It's another one where I like it in theory. However, exact same situation with Marnie, where in his final battle, he's the protege of Opal, the other fairy specialist. And they also gave him a Mawile when, she also has one. And I don't really understand that. I feel like it doesn't fit his aesthetic at all. Mawile, especially by this point, really just felt like a fairy type they just kind of threw on teams that they didn't know what else to give a fairy specialist. Because the fairy specialist Valerie from Gen 6 also had a Mawile, which was fine there because the point of that was showing that it used to not have fairy, but now it does. But then Opal and Beatty, whatever, both have Mawile, especially when she was like geeking over the fact that he was wearing pink, and Mawile definitely not pink, or even I don't know. It just doesn't really seem to fit him to me for me personally. So I decided to give him Clefable instead of Mawile and level up his Gothitelle that he had in previous fights back when he was more of a psychic specialist. Similar to how Marnie has a Toxicroak, it's not her type specialty, but it still kind of fits her style and aesthetic. Gothitelle, I feel, is a Pokemon that was from his original team that, although it's not a fairy type, it still fits him enough that it should be on his final team. So I'm going to put him right below Marnie. Like I said, they have kind of similar issues to each other. And there is one other actually in both cases there's another trainer that took up a lot of the potential options from them. So it's not necessarily that there are a lot of other options for them to pick in order to represent the region better. So I'm not going to be super harsh about their teams, but because they only have five Pokemon, because there is overlap where there ideally shouldn't be, they're 17 and 18 respectively. Not quite done with Gen 8 quite yet. Isle of Armor introduced two new rivals for you, depending on the game you have, starting with Clara. Um, I like her team. I like how both I think Clara, yeah, Clara and Avery both have both the Galarian Slowking and Slowbro. Just it depends on like they switch aces depending on who you're fighting. I like that. I like her Galarian Weezing. There weren't too many poison types you could have picked from outside of Toxtricity, but I didn't really feel like Toxtricity fit her very well. So it's okay that she doesn't have another uh, a poison type from this generation. Um, she does have three regional variants, and those are functionally Pokemon from this gen. So the only real change I had was give her a Vileplume. It's a Pokemon that has always been grass poison, but it's never really been associated with poison outside of kind of on Ariana's team from Team Rocket, where like she's not a poison specialist, but she's a villain trainer and villainy is associated with poison. So outside of that, kind of, it's never really been associated with as poison typing. Maybe kind of Karen, but again, this dark and poison. It's her poisonness has never really been able to really shine. So I think Vileplume here gives it that opportunity. Plus, it helps counter the ground types that would otherwise at least be annoying to the rest of the team. But once again, because she only has the five Pokemon, I can't put her super high. Just above Marnie, I think feels about right. Her and Marnie, I could kind of go either way on, but kind of like how I mentioned before with Trace and Blue, because they're not in the top five or the bottom five, it's not as big of a deal that I get those exactly right. But I still think it's kind of fun that I personally feel like all of the rivals from Gen 7, or sorry, Gen 8, are relatively close together. And I think that's fun. Speaking of which, lastly, Arvin. Sorry, Avery. Arvin comes later. This is Avery. Avery specifically, I do have a little bit of beef with because there are other psychic types he could have had. Um, because the main psychic specialist that they were building up in Sword and Shield ended up becoming a fairy specialist, there are other psychic types on the table that he could have used but didn't. Um, like I know the idea is probably they specifically wanted him to use Pokemon that are found in the Isle of Armor. I know Alakazam isn't in the base game; it is in the DLC. I think Subat. No, Subat is there in the base game, but that's probably their mindset with Alakazam. But I do like how there's still three regional variants. One of them being part fairy. I find that fun that they both have a part fairy regional variant. And Alakazam and Swoobat are both cool Pokemon to be here, especially Swoobat, who has never really been associated with his psychic typing. However, Alakazam is a little overused. Again, I do like the intentionality of it being an Isle of Armor Pokemon, but there are at least two other psychic types in Generation 8 that are nowhere else that could have been here, so I'm going to put them here. Those being Orbeetle and Indeedee. Indeedee is a Pokemon that you see a lot throughout the game. They're in every Pokemon Center next to the Name Raider slash Pokemon Rememberer or Move Rememberer guy. So you see them a lot throughout, but you never really fight one on a major team. Same with Orbeetle. It's Pokemon that you have access to very early on. It even has a Gigantamax form, yet no one ever uses it. Ideally, I would have liked Clara to also have a Gigantamax form, and maybe that's a point towards her having toxicity because no one else who Gigantamaxes has a toxicity, and maybe she should have one instead of Drapion, especially since they gave one to Marnie. But actually, yeah, I've talked myself into that. If for no other reason than just to continue the parallels between Clara and Avery, I I am saying she should have toxicity and let it Gigantamax if the opportunity came where they can Gigantamax something. So yeah, and he can heal Gigantamax Orbeetle. I know it wouldn't be the most correct because in Gen 8 they're only ever programmed as Gigantamax their last Pokemon, but this could be an exception. Yeah. Okay. Avery, because both Orbital and Indini were both potentially on the table, and he didn't take either of them, and only having 5 Pokemon. Yeah, putting him right below Beatty, the other psychic-ish specialist, and right above May. Scarlet and Violet. Um, Spoilers, I really, really like all three of these rivals a lot. Um, but this, by you can probably see from the runtime of this video, this is where a lot of the bloat of rivals kind of comes from because there are three main rivals in the base game. There are then two extra rivals in the DLC, and then additional rival fights in the post game of that. So yeah, we're gonna spend a lot of time in Generation 9 here. So starting off with Nimona. This is the last fight you have with her. Right after you beat the champion, you can then fight her. This is a very, very solid team. Um, I actually like that she has the Dunsparce. Now, I did give the Dunsparce to Larry as his ace. However, I am perfectly okay with two different trainers having the same Pokemon if that Pokemon can feasibly do very different things. For example, the Dunsparce specifically, there's two very viable ways you can use the Dunsparce. Um, there's the Coil set, and then there's the Calm Mind set. Coil set, you set up your defense, attack, and accuracy. You then fire off earthquakes, hyper drills, body slams, like whatever physical attacks you can use. You're roosting up any damage you take while still building up your attack and defense. And yeah, having it more of a physical tank. Whereas the Calm Mind set, it has a fairly usable special attack stat and then a pretty good amount of special attacks it can also have access to. Shadow Ball, Ancient Power, Boom Burst, a very powerful normal attack. So I think it'd be perfectly fine if Larry has the physical one. It doesn't necessarily the initial fight have to have the full on coil roost shenanigans going on, but at least knowing Hyper Drill is fine, especially just to show the strength of normal types. This 100 power move that only the Dunsparce has. And then when you fight Nimona, hers can be the full on Calm Mind Boom Burst set. Well, maybe also knowing Ancient Power and Shadow Ball or Roost or whatever else to fill that last spot. But the idea is it gets out there and just absolutely obliterates you with Boom Burst. I think that's fine because they both can do very different things. I don't necessarily love her having Orthworm. I don't know, something about her having one of the um, the Titan Pokemon feels a little weird to me, especially since from my knowledge, no other major trainers really use the Titan Pokemon. So it's not bad. I don't necessarily hate it here. It just if there was from memory, I can't think of any other instances. So if there was one other major instance of that happening, I could be wrong. There could be, but as far as the base game, I don't really remember major trainers having those Pokemon. But it's not bad, and it does kind of it, although it does potentially make it so that four of our Pokemon are weak to fighting, but yeah, it's it's fine. I like her Goodra a lot. Obviously, Palmont kind of as a secondary ace. And Lycanroc, you kind of see that build up throughout. Yeah, very, very solid team. It's another one of those where it's not really a like definitive change. It's more of just here's a suggestion for what you could do to make it, if not better, just different. And I think an overall positive direction. I personally think instead of the midday form Lycanroc, you get for dusk form Lycanroc. From knowledge, no other major trainer uses dusk form Lycanroc. The Kukui champion fight from Sun and Moon, he has midday Lycanroc. there might be one other trainer, but I can't think of who it would be right now. Oh, no, not that one. Never mind. Whatever. But regardless, I think just especially if you're going off of her Scarlet appearance, I think aesthetically it fits her very well. Um, like I said, no other trainers have one. It's functionally very similar to Midday Lycanroc. It's only, I believe, 10 points slower. So it still has a very high opportunity to outspeed your Pokemon and get up stealth rocks. It can still use Excel Rock, hit you very strong with with other physical attacks. So I just think it can still do all the things that the other form can do while being unique to her. And then Paldean Tauros. In the intro little cutscene of Scarlet and Violet, you see Nimona fighting another trainer at the trainer school, and she's using a Tauros. And throughout the entire game, my first playthrough, I thought for sure at some point she would use that Tauros against you. Now, maybe she was renting it from the school, or maybe it's just one of the Pokemon that she, has, and when she fights you, she was just using a new team just for the fun of it. But in her final post-champion fight, I thought it'd be cool for her to have Tauros, especially since she did just tack on Earthworm. She finally tacks on Tauros. She has up to two other fighting types on her team anyway, so why not throw on a Paldean Tauros? Luckily, they did kind of remedy this by in the post game after the post game fight in the Blueberry Academy. Uh, After you beat her, yeah, I guess it's after you beat her, she has the opportunity, just like all the other major trainers, to trade you some Pokemon for whatever you want to give her, and she'll trade you this Tauros. So I think they finally came full circle on that at the last minute, and I really like that. But it still would have been cool to see it on her actual team. So for Nimona, I'm gonna put her final fight from Scarlet and Violet at number 9, right above Berry, right below Blue from Red and Blue. Just something about her having Midday Lycanroc and Earthworm, even though I like the rest of her team fine enough, that alone is just, I don't know, it just doesn't give me, it just doesn't have that oomph factor, like I mentioned with Hop, that Blue's team from Red and Blue has. Whereas I personally feel like this team would at least get a little closer to what I'm looking for. So that's my justification for that. Next up, Arvin. I really like this team. I really like how they specifically picked Pokemon that can help you take on the Titan Pokemon. I think the team as a whole just synergizes very well. They're all just incredibly hard to take down. Obviously, Cloyster and Garganical have very high defenses. Toedscruel has very high special defense. Greedent just has incredibly high HP. A boss diff, you don't want to take it down because it makes you too sad. Scovillain's also there. It's cool. Like I really like Scovillain, but it kind of fits his his cook aesthetic. And I guess you cook with peppers, so I guess that's what that's doing there. Um, I do really like Scovillain, the idea of that being there because it's good against both of the Donphan variants. Is good against the steel typing of Iron Threads and is good against Transplayer and is good against obviously the ground typing of Great Tusks. So just a very well constructed team. However, the one change I personally would make is switching out Scovillain. Since I gave Scovillain to Brassius, switch that out for Sarilege. You're still not overlapping any types. You still have a fire type, and I think this solves two major issues. One, um, in when you fight the giant earthworm, he uses Toedscool to fight it. However, because of Earthworm's ability, Toedscool isn't nearly as impactful as it could be. Because it cannot use any ground moves into Earthworm since its ability makes it immune to it. So I think it knows like supersonic and hex, so it can help you be it can help you out by being annoying, but it's not really gonna help lower its speed or accuracy with Mud Shot or Mud Slap or something. And which would be remedied by him having either a Charcadet or even a Cerulege by that point. It would fire obviously super effective into steel, and then he would still have Toad Scroll for when you fight the Donphan variant. Ground is good into steel and grass is good into ground. So either game, Toad Scroll is still good into that Titan. So they essentially they switch places, and I think this actually works out a lot better. But Scoville, and I still really like the idea of this new Pokemon being there to be super effective into either Titan, but Toedscruel can still fill that similar role while allowing me to finally put Cerulege somewhere, because I was really struggling about where exactly Cerulege will show up on any of these. Like, does it show up on the Ghost Gym Leader? Does it show up on the Champion? Does it show up here? Does Namona have one? So I just feel like Arvid having one, I think that fixes a lot of problems I've been having. Plus, I feel like I don't know, I feel like it fits him. But because I am just so impressed by his team, he actually is at number 5, right above Gladion and right below Wally. If he had a Pokemon that wasn't a Greedent, I really do not like Greedent. It fits him well because like it's like an eating buddy or whatever. Um, but if it was, I don't know, any other, like if it was another strong normal type or another Pokemon that was a type he didn't already have, he does kind of look like a Skwovet, so I can't say he shouldn't have one. I think that's what they're going for. But I just really don't like Greedent as a Pokemon, so that's a completely biased choice. But Wally's team is still very, very impressive, and I still feel like just the intentionality between those picks put him over the edge a little bit over Gladion. Last up, Penny. Um, Very, very solid team. Obviously, a very gimmicky team of a bunch of evolutions. The only real fix I would do is maybe give her um, Espeon instead of Umbreon and or Glaceon instead of Leafeon. But it, with evolution specifically, it's very it's very tough to make a whole team of them because there's 8, but only 9 if you include Vivi, but only 6 potential spots on a team. So no matter what you do, you are going to upset somebody. Obviously, Umbreon is a fan favorite Pokemon just in general, let alone a fan favorite evolution. So you kind of have to do Umbreon. And then Leafeon and Glaceon, I feel are, I don't know, they're in general, from what I can see, I could be completely wrong, but I feel like both of them are definitely in the lower half as far as like the general populations. If the general population had a tier list of evolutions, I feel like those two would pretty consistently be in, at least one of those two would be pretty consistently in the bottom half. So I don't know if you just don't have Leafeon at all and put Espeon there, or have Espeon, or have a you know Glaceon instead of Leafeon, if it really matters, because you can't get rid of one of the original 3, and obviously Sylveon is her Pokemon, so I don't know. It was a little tricky. I understand, it was obviously very tricky making this team for her, but maybe they could have done it in a rematch. She switched it up a little bit, but regardless, it's a fun team, but it is a gimmicky team that because of that, I have to put it at number 16, just above Serena. That's about as high as I feel like I could go with it being this gimmicky team. You only fight her really the one time. She does have a very significant, purpose to the story, so I still wanted to include her on this list. But you do only fight her the one time, and it's just a bunch of evolutions, which is a cool fight. It's not really that hard necessarily, but it's still, especially if you don't see it coming, it can catch you off guard. Now, on to the DLC. Starting off with Kieran. Now, I'm going to be breaking the rules a little bit. I specifically wanted to highlight his final team specifically as your rival in the Teal Mask DLC. I'll go over his champion team in a separate video down the road when I talk about champions specifically. But this team I feel is super interesting because similar to Hop, Kieran, his team goes on an adventure with you as you progress. Like like when you first fight him, he has Yanma, then he has a Yanma and a Politoed, and I think Gligar. Yeah. Like these three Pokemon, you know, feel very cheery, just aesthetically. They're they like I don't know, they just give general good vibes. But then as you progress, as Kieran's descent into darkness progresses, his team kind of gets darker along with him, and I really like that. Yanmega is now big and scary. Shiftry is obviously a dark type. Poliwrath, his Poliwhirl evolves into Poliwrath. Same with Gligar and Score. It's a big scary vampire bad thing. My only issue with this team is Probopass feels very out of place. It does help with some weaknesses to some types this team is weak to, specifically fire. Um, but I don't know. And flying. Yeah, oh yeah, and flying, definitely flying, and ice for that matter. His team, yeah, ice and flying. Those specifically do counter most of his team, but Probopass just doesn't really seem to fit him. I just feel like it doesn't give off the vibe that the rest of his team outside of Diplin is really trying to give off. I showed it briefly, but the only change I would really do is switch that out for Salazzle. It doesn't really help the issues I was saying with with a lot of his team being weak to flying. It does help with the ice weakness. So at least there's that. Um, but I feel like Salazzle just, it being a poison type, uh, I feel like that at least is better representative of what they were going for with his descent into darkness than Probopass. As far as his final team as a rival in the first batch of DLC, I'm actually putting him at number 5, just above Arvin. It's a team that is extremely unique to him. It is very powerful. I know I did just bash his promo pass, but it is still very. It can be a tricky Pokemon to take down. I believe it's holding a Chople Berry, so your fighting moves aren't going to one shot it. I believe it has Sturdy as well, so you're not going to one shot it regardless. Um, yeah, it if he had any other Pokemon that I felt fit his theme even better than Probopass, I would honestly probably put Kieran even higher up, just because I like the intentionality and originality between his team, of his team so much. But how it is right now, Kieran at a very solid number 5 feels right to me. Next up, his sister Carmine. Um, this is the fight you have with her when you get to the Blueberry Academy. And I believe this is the only time you fight her with the full team of 6. I could be wrong about that. But I don't know. Something about her team having 3 dark types feels almost like they kind of missed the point of her character. Like, yeah, she's a little, like she was a little mean at first, but I don't know, almost kind of felt like a facade. Like, but I really liked her Leaveny. I felt like it fit her, her just overall vibe a lot. Her having more Pico and Scrafty meant that she has 2 Pokemon that Marnie has. Scrafty, I just feel doesn't really fit her at all, really, in my opinion. So, I personally would just switch out Scrafty for Leaveny and call it a day. I just really like that Pokemon on her team. I feel like it, kind of shows that she does have a softer side as opposed to her having a bunch of dark types. I just feel like it brings the whole team together better. So because of that, I'm going to put her down at 16th. I'm finally going to put something between Sharon and Hugh. Um, yeah, because Scrafty is the Pokemon they decided to put there. If it was most other dark types, I don't think I would have an issue with it as long as it wasn't an overlap, specifically uh, with Marnie. But yeah, it at least is more unique than Hugh's team. So I'll give her that. Lastly, Nemona's rematch teams from the Blueberry Academy DLC. These teams are incredible. There are three different entire teams you can fight depending on which starter you picked. So this is the team. She has Quaquaval. She has Quaquaval, Decidueye, and Rabambi. I don't really know why Rabambi is here, but you know, it's still a very unique Pokemon to put with the rest of it. This one specifically is an absolutely phenomenal team. Infernape, Meowscarada, and Milotic, completing the Firegrass Water Core. And I should also mention Komao. Great. I absolutely adore her switching out Gudra for Komao. I like Gudra, but I don't know. Komao does seem to kind of fit her a little better personally. But yeah, this year. Um, Infernape is a fantastic choice because a lot of people kind of joked that she acts a lot like Goku does, where she's always trying to make sure she's fighting you at your strongest. She wants you to get stronger so she can get stronger, like that kind of vibe that Goku has. And Infernape is based on Journey to the West, the same Chinese story that Goku is based on. So I really want to know if this was intentional. Like, did they see the fans' reaction to her personality and pick Infernape specifically? I'm not sure. There's no real way of telling. But like they didn't pick Embor, they picked Infernape. Yeah, this team is incredible. Like I said, ideally she would have the dusk form Lycanroc, but it's not that big of a deal. And then having Palmont be consistent again, kind of as her pseudo ace, I really like. But then lastly, this team here where she has Dusknoir as the other one, it's just another very strong third Pokemon to have. It does overlap technically a little bit with Skeledirge, although it's kind of okay considering in this fight her starter now Terra types into. Actually, no, never mind. Because usually a Terra types into their primary type, Fire, Grass, Water. But I think this time it actually does Terra type into a Ghost type. So that's a little weird. But regardless, they're all three just very strong, very unique teams. And this is absolutely one of those times where it's not me trying to fix it, it's just a suggestion for something they could do. When I was looking at these teams, I was thinking of two different ways of fixing it. The first way would be just have another Pokemon on there that would fix the fire, grass, water core, similar to how Milotic, did it for that second team. I would have it here. I don't care too much about type overlap, considering they have a Komao and a Palmont consistent throughout. They're both fighter types, so I think it's fine to have Chandelure and Decidueye here. I wanted three fire, grass, water types that were around 520, 530 ish based out total. So for the Infernape team, and this was a mistake. Oh, number not sorry. I forgot to mention. Yeah, I forgot to mention. I did add Lycanroc Dusk form, like I fixed in her base teams. So for all of these Lycanroc Dusk form, you're keeping Komao, Palmont starter Pokemons, and then switching out the last one. So a Chandelure, Lapras, and a Alolan Exeggutor. And again, I don't really care that much about the type overlap between Exeggutor and Komao here. All three of these fire, grass, water types have around 520, 530 ish base stat total. And there are three just very potent Pokemon that I feel like she could have. This could be Milotic. I don't really care that much, but I wanted them all to be dual types to, just to. It felt more in the spirit of putting it of fleshing out her teams, considering the other two starters she had are also dual types. But as much as I like these teams a lot, and these are probably what I would consider the canon teams, when going over these teams, I noticed that for they had the starter Pokemon from Gen 9, and then it seems intentional that for the other starter they picked one that has the type that they're weak to, and then their secondary type is the type that the other starter has that her starter Pokemon is strong into. For example, Decidueye obviously is grass, so Quaquaval is weak to it, but Skeledirge is ghost type, and Decidueye is ghost type. Same with Infernape. Obviously, grass is weak into fire, but Quaquaval being fighting type, Infernape has fighting typing. And then it's reinforced even more here. Meowscarada would be the one that goes where Alolan Exeggutor is, and that would be grass dark. Greninja is water dark. It felt very intentional for them to do that. So, what I did for a second kind of suggestion fix here is I decided to completely complete that triangle. So first you have the water fighting starter Pokemon, the grass ghost starter Pokemon, and then a Houndoom to complete the fire dark type. That because now you have every type that the starter Pokemon from Gen 9 turn into, all of them are accounted for here. Same here, Basculegion. It is a little stronger than the other two picks I put here, but there aren't. I didn't want to give them Jellicent. I don't think Jellicent are even in this game. So Basculegion is a Pokemon that you find in the Blueberry Academy. So I feel like it goes here. And same with the Milotic team. I think this is probably her most canon team, in my opinion. Lastly, I had to fudge this slightly. Hisuian Lilligant isn't available in the base Sword and Shield, or sorry, Scarlet and Violet, or even the DLC. You do have to import it in from Legends Arceus into through Pokemon Home. But if I were making these games, I would personally just have some kind of special stone or place or some kind of way to allow Pokemon that are specifically from Legends Arceus to be able to evolve into their regional variants. So because of that, I put Hisuian and Lilligant here to add the grass fighting typing. So yeah, like I said, I really do feel like this team here with Dustform, Lycanroc, and Lapras, or Milotic, whichever you really prefer. I feel like this is probably, in my opinion, would be her most canon team. With this here, Infernape, Masquerada, Milotic being what I consider her most canon team in the like the real game. So after all of that, she is the final rival fight that has a unique team that I personally consider a rival. So, final rankings. From bottom to the top, we have Trevor, Shauna, May from Ruby Sapphire Emerald, Tierno, Wally from Ruby Sapphire Emerald, Silver, May from Oras, Avery, Beatty, Marnie, Clara, Gladian from Sun and Moon, Hal from Sun and Moon, Serena, Penny, Hugh, Carmine, Charon, Bianca, Hop, Barry, Nimona, Blue from Red and Blue, Blue from Yellow, Trace, Gladion from Ultra Sun and Moon, Arvin, Kieran, Wally from Oras, Blue from Leafy and Fire Red, Hal from Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon, and then Nimona, her DLC fight from the from the Blueberry Academy is the single best rival throughout the entire franchise. And again, this is just my opinion, but I genuinely believe that she did the single best job at being a challenging fight, at being having a very unique team. Just a very, very good, climactic rival fight, basically to end the game on. Because I do believe that she is at least tied, if not the strongest trainer you can fight throughout that entire game. And by extension, one of the, if not the, you know, tied for strongest single Pokemon you can fight throughout the entire franchise. So because of all that hurt, specifically the team that has Infernape, Miascarada, and Milotic. I just think that team specifically is just personally the most impressive team that a rival has ever had. It's honestly in is very, very close. And maybe I'm giving Nimona the edge slightly just because his In's Reshiram or Zekrom, whichever, is kind of carrying that team a little bit. Um, Otherwise, it obviously wouldn't be as strong. But yeah, I just really, really like how Nemona's final team uh, shaped up. And like I said, the changes I made, they weren't even really like because I thought they were bad. It's just here's something that I think would be cool if she had instead. So, with all that said, Nimona, congratulations. You are the single best rival in all of Pokemon. Yeah. Let me know what you think down below. Let me know if you feel like you think someone else has a better team. Let me know if you feel like I missed any major trainers that could be considered rivals. Let me know if you have any strong or strong positive or negative feelings of any of these other rivals. Let me know if you feel I ranked someone too high or too low. Like I said, there were some that could kind of go either way, but they weren't they I didn't feel like it was as important to make some people not in the top five or top bottom. It didn't matter it like significantly enough to get those orders exactly right. But I am personally very happy with how this list shaped up, and also very happy with the suggestion for how I would change them. And also let me know if there are any suggestions that you guys have. I really like hearing any discussions about any of this down below. So yeah, I really do hope to continue doing this kinds of series. I have a lot of ideas for other trainer analysis and that kind of thing going forward. But yeah, I finally nailed down who I personally believe is the single best rival in all Pokemon, that being Nimona. So with that, take care.